They say you can tell a lot about a person by what they keep, but I've learned you can tell even more by what they throw away. I was on my knees on the cold concrete floor of the garage, the knees of my trousers stained with oil and dust. The air was thick, humid, smelling of gasoline, potting soil, and the sour, metallic tang of old garbage. Above me, a single fluorescent bulb hummed, flickering with a dying yellow light that cast long, dancing shadows against the pegboard where my tools hung in organized silence. Inside the house, I could hear her, Clarissa. She was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice ringing out like a bell, clear, bright, and happy. She was laughing. It was a sound that used to make my chest swell with pride, a sound that used to signal home. Now, after 40 years of marriage, that laughter sounded like something else entirely. It sounded like the cha-ching of a cash register drawer sliding open. I reached into the black plastic garbage bag in front of me. Most husbands who suspect their wives of secrets look through purses, they check text messages, they smell collars for perfume. I am Henry Vance. I am 68 years old, and I have been a forensic accountant for 4 decades. I don't look for lipstick, I look for the paper trail. My hands, wrapped in latex gloves that snapped tight against my wrists, sifted through the refuse of our week. Coffee grounds, eggshells, a discarded yogurt container. And then, there it was, balled up tight, hidden inside a used paper towel like a shameful secret. I carefully uncrumpled the thermal paper. It was stained brown at the edges, damp and fragile. I smoothed it out on the concrete, squinting against the dim light. Lee Bijou Boutique, downtown. Item, 100% silk scarf, hand-painted. $400. Date, yesterday. I stared at the numbers. $450 for a strip of fabric. I remembered yesterday. I remembered her coming home, wearing that scarf. When I complimented it, she had waved a dismissive hand, the diamonds on her fingers catching the light. She had said, "My mother sent it to me." Her mother has been dead for 6 years. I didn't feel anger. Anger is a hot, fast emotion, and I didn't have the energy for it. I felt a cold, heavy stone settle in my gut. It was the weight of confirmation. It was the weight of math that didn't balance. I picked up the receipt with tweezers and walked over to my workbench. Behind a stack of half-empty paint cans, hidden in the shadows, was a row of thick, black 3-ring binders. They looked innocuous, boring, the kind of things an old man keeps to organize his mundane life. I opened it. It wasn't taxes. It was a graveyard of lies. Plastic sleeves filled page after page, each one holding a smoothed-out receipt, a credit card statement intercepted from the mail, or a handwritten note I had fished out of the shredder and taped back together. I slid the receipt for the scarf into a new sleeve. It nestled next to a receipt for a $1,200 handbag she claimed she won in a raffle. For 5 years, Clarissa had been renovating our lives. New furniture that appeared while I was at work. A wardrobe that transformed with the seasons. She told me everything was on sale. She told me she used coupons. She told me she was a wizard with a budget. But I am an accountant. I know that numbers don't lie, only people do. And the numbers in our joint account were bleeding out. The pension was fixed. The savings were draining like a tub with the plug pulled. We were drowning, and she was buying silk scarves to wear to the funeral of our solvency. I heard the door from the kitchen open. The laughter stopped. I slammed the binder shut and shoved it back behind the paint cans just as Clarissa stepped into the garage. She was radiant. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse that I knew cost $300, and her hair was freshly done, stiff with hairspray and entitlement. She held a glossy brochure in her hand, waving it like a flag of victory. "Henry, there you are. Why are you always lurking in here?" "I was looking for a washer," I lied, standing up and wiping my hands on a rag. "Forget the faucet," she said, her eyes shining with a manic excitement. She crossed the garage, her heels clicking on the concrete, and shoved the brochure into my chest. "I found it! Look!" I looked down. The brochure was heavy, expensive cardstock. "The palms at Vero Beach," I asked. "Our future, Henry. I was talking to my sister and she told me about it. Ocean views, a championship golf course, full service, 5-star dining every night. No more cooking, no more cleaning. It's expensive, but we deserve it." I opened the brochure. The prices were listed in the back in small, discreet font. The monthly fee was more than my entire monthly pension check. The buy-in fee was half of our remaining life savings. "Clarissa," I said, my voice quiet. "Of course we can," she scoffed, dismissing my concern with a wave of her manicured hand. "We sell this house, we use the 401k, we make it work. You always do this, Henry." "It's not gloom," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "It's arithmetic. The pension is fixed. The savings are draining. We are not wealthy people, Clarissa. We are comfortable, or we were, until—" I stopped myself. I couldn't show my hand. Not yet. Her face hardened. The mask of the loving, excited wife slipped, just for a second, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Until," she challenged, "until I started enjoying my life? Is that it? You want me to be a drudge forever? I checked the balances online, Henry. We have plenty." She took a step closer, her perfume cloying and sweet in the stagnant air. "Unless you're hiding money from me, is that it?" The audacity took my breath away. She was spending us into poverty, lighting our future on fire to keep herself warm, and accusing me of theft. It was gaslighting of the highest order. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "I am not hiding anything," I said, my voice flat. "Good," she snapped. She threw the brochure onto my workbench, right next to the hidden binders. "Because I booked a tour for next month. Figure it out, Henry. You're the accountant. Make the numbers work." She turned on her heel and walked out, the door slamming shut behind her, leaving me alone with the dust and the silence. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. I realized then that the woman I married 40 years ago didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. Maybe I had just been too busy balancing the books for other people to notice that my own ledger was being cooked. I watched her walk away, realizing that the woman I married didn't want a partner. She wanted a financer for a life I couldn't afford. If you've ever been made to feel crazy for asking where the money went, hit that subscribe button. You need to see what happens when the accountant finally balances the books. I didn't go inside for dinner. I told her I wasn't hungry. I waited until the lights in the house went out, until I was sure she was asleep in the master bedroom, dreaming of ocean views and golf carts. Then I went back to the garage. I locked the door from the inside. I moved the heavy rubber floor mat near the tool bench. Underneath, cut into the concrete foundation, was a floor safe I had installed 10 years ago. Clarissa didn't know it existed. She never came into the garage unless she wanted something fixed or wanted to complain. I spun the dial. Left to 10. Right to 24. Left to 55. The heavy steel door clicked open. I reached in and pulled out the stack. It wasn't just the 2019 taxes binder. There were 20 of them. A library of betrayal. A monument to avarice. I sat on my stool, the only light coming from the flickering bulb overhead, and I began to audit my marriage. I opened a binder from 2015. I flipped past the receipts for clothes and jewelry. I stopped at a page that I had flagged with a red tab. The Grand View Hotel, room 302, Friday, October 14th. Room service, champagne, 2 orders of oysters Rockefeller, chocolate soufflé. 100. I remembered that date. I remembered it perfectly. Clarissa had told me she was going to her mother's house to help sort through her estate. She had been gone all weekend. She had come home crying, telling me how hard it was to say goodbye to her childhood memories. She hadn't been at her mother's. She had been at the Grandview, 20 miles away. And she hadn't been alone. You don't order 24 oysters and champagne for a solo grief retreat. I turned the page. Another receipt. A lease agreement. Apartment 4B, the Kensington Arms. Tenant, Clarissa Vance, maiden name. Monthly rent, $2,200. She had a second apartment, a boat hole, a place to keep her secrets. A place to take whoever was eating those oysters with her. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a tightening that made it hard to breathe. It wasn't a heart attack. It was heartbreak. It was the realization that my entire life was a lie. I wasn't just a husband. I was a mark. I was the sucker who paid the bills while she lived a double life on my dime. I sat there for hours, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and old paper, weeping. I cried for the young man who fell in love with her smile. I cried for the years of working late nights during tax season, thinking I was building a nest egg for us. I cried until my eyes were dry and scratchy. And then, as the first gray light of dawn began to creep under the garage door, the tears stopped. The accountant took over. Emotions are variables. They are messy, unpredictable, and they skew the data. Evidence is a constant. Evidence is binary. It either exists or it doesn't. And I had mountains of it. She wanted to go to Florida. She wanted to sell the house. She wanted to bleed me dry and leave me to rot in a state facility while she lived off the carcass of my hard work. No. I closed the binder. The snap of the rings was loud in the quiet garage. It sounded like a gunshot. I needed to prove it, not just to myself. I needed to prove it to a judge. Because if I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would gaslight me. She would destroy the evidence. She would charm the court into giving her half of what was left, plus alimony, leaving me destitute. I had to strike first, and I had to strike with the precision of a tax audit. I reached for the phone on the wall. I dialed a number I had kept in my wallet for 3 months, hoping I would never have to use it. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Samuel," I whispered, my voice rasping from the hours of silence and tears. Samuel was a divorce attorney. He didn't have friends. He had clients and victims. Samuel grunted. "It's Henry Vance," I said, "the accountant." There was a pause. I could hear him sitting up, the rustle of sheets. "Vance? The quiet guy? What happened?" "She found it," I said. "The binder, Samuel. 20 years of receipts. The hotel bills, the jewelry, the secret apartment lease, the credit cards in my name. I have the files." The line was silent for a long moment. Then I heard a sound I recognized. It was the sound of a predator waking up. Samuel asked, his voice sharp and alert. "Every single dollar," I said. "Bring them to my office at 8. Don't let her see you leave. If what you say is true, Henry, we aren't just going to divorce her." I hung up the phone. I looked at the stack of black binders. They weren't just paper anymore. They were my shield. They were my sword. I stood up, my knees popping, my back stiff. I picked up the brochure for the Palms at Vero Beach from where she had thrown it. I looked at the picture of the smiling, wealthy couple on the front. I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it into the trash can, right on top of the coffee grounds. "Figure it out," I whispered to the empty room. The camera focuses tight on the spine of the binder Henry is holding. He writes one word in block letters: evidence. Fade to black. Courtrooms are designed to intimidate. The high ceilings, the polished wood, the silence that presses down on you like a physical weight. It's all meant to make you feel small. But as I walked into courtroom 4B, trailing behind Samuel, I didn't feel small. I felt heavy. I felt like a man carrying the weight of a mountain on his back, and for the first time in 20 years, I was ready to set it down. Clarissa was already there. She sat at the opposing table, looking fragile and demure. She was wearing a modest gray suit, a piece I recognized instantly. She had bought it 3 weeks ago at a department store sale, charged it to the joint visa, and told me it was for a funeral. She was performing the role of the beleaguered wife perfectly. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup minimal. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, a picture of quiet suffering. Her lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling who wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide, leaned over and whispered something to her. She nodded, casting a fearful glance in my direction. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Eleanor Sterling entered. She was a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She didn't look like someone who tolerated nonsense. She sat down, adjusted her robes, and looked over the top of her spectacles at us. "We are here for the matter of Vance v. Vance," she said, her voice dry as dust. Mr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked to the center of the room, his stride confident. He painted a picture of a marriage that was a prison. He described me as a miser, a control freak who monitored every penny, forcing my poor wife to live in squalor while I hoarded wealth like a dragon. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice dripping with false empathy, "my client asks for nothing more than what is fair. She supported this man for 40 years. She kept his home, she managed their life. And in return, she was given an allowance. She was denied basic necessities. We are asking for 50% of the marital assets, plus alimony to maintain the lifestyle she should have had. We believe Mr. Vance is hiding substantial funds." Clarissa let out a small, choked sob. It was perfect. The judge looked at her with a flicker of sympathy. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, turning her gaze to me. "I do, Your Honor." I stood up. My knees popped audibly in the quiet room, a reminder of the age I felt in my bones. But my voice was steady. It didn't waver. It was the voice of a man who has checked the math 3 times. Samuel stood beside me. He didn't open a briefcase. He didn't shuffle papers. He simply nodded to the bailiff at the back of the room. The double doors swung open. 2 legal assistants walked in, pushing a heavy, squeaking metal trolley. On it were 20 thick, black 3-ring binders stacked 3 feet high. They looked like a monolith of black plastic and paper. The room went silent. The only sound was the squeak of the trolley wheels. Clarissa frowned. The tissue froze halfway to her eye. Confusion flickered across her face, replacing the performance of grief. She leaned forward, squinting. "Judge Sterling?" asked, frowning. I looked at Clarissa. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flash of genuine fear. "My wife claims I denied her necessities," I continued, my voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "She claims I hid money. She claims I was a tyrant. These binders contain every single receipt she has thrown away in the last 20 years. A murmur ran through the few people in the gallery. Mr. Sterling chuckled, a nervous, dismissive sound. He scoffed, "For what? Groceries?" "Not groceries," I said. I opened the first binder. The plastic sleeves crackled. "Exhibit A," I announced. "May 12, 2005. A receipt for a diamond tennis bracelet, platinum setting, valued at $5,000. Clarissa claimed it was costume jewelry she found at a flea market for $20. I held up the page. The receipt was taped there, yellowed with age but legible. Next to it was a photo I had taken of her wearing it at a Christmas party. Clarissa went pale. She whispered frantically to her lawyer. I closed that binder and opened another, moving down the stack. "Exhibit B," I said. "July 2010 to August 2015. Monthly receipts for a climate-controlled storage unit on the west side of town." I pulled out a sheaf of photos. Inside that unit, which I accessed yesterday with a court order, are designer handbags, fur coats, high-end electronics, and artwork. The inventory total is over $200,000. Mr. Sterling stopped smiling. He looked at the mountain of binders, then at his client. The color had drained from his face. "And finally," I said, reaching for the small red notebook that sat on top of the stack like a cherry on a poisoned sundae. "This isn't a receipt." I opened it. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from the memory of the nights I sat alone waiting for her to come home. "Receipts for hotels," I read. "The Grand View Hotel, room 302. Every Friday night for 3 years. Room service for 2. Champagne, oysters." I looked at Clarissa. Her eyes were wide, terrified saucers. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She knew. She knew that I knew. The judge's eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, "which exceeds the entire value of our remaining marital estate. She hasn't just spent her share, she has spent mine too, twice over." Clarissa stood up, shaking violently. The tissue fell from her hand, drifting to the floor like a white flag of surrender. She shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. "Those are fake! He made them up!" "They are thermal originals, Your Honor," Samuel interjects smoothly, stepping forward. "Dated, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with bank statements from accounts we subpoenaed this morning." The judge looked at the binders. She looked at the red notebook. Then she looked at Clarissa. The sympathy was gone. It had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard glare of justice. "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Clarissa collapsed into her chair. She looked small, defeated. The ruling took less than an hour. It was a massacre. She awarded me the house, the remaining savings, what little there was, and the contents of the secret storage unit to liquidate for reimbursement. Clarissa got nothing but the debt she had accrued in her own name. She was leaving the marriage with exactly what she had brought to it. Nothing. The gavel banged. It was a sharp, final sound, like a door slamming shut on 40 years of my life. I gathered my binders. They felt lighter now. The trolley squeaked as the assistants wheeled it away. Clarissa stood up. Her lawyer was already packing his briefcase, refusing to look at her. She walked past me on her way to the aisle. She stopped. The mask was gone completely. There was no love, no regret, no sadness. There was only the furious, hateful realization that the miser she had mocked for decades had been keeping score the whole time. "I hope the receipts keep you warm at night," she spat, her face twisted into a sneer. I looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt nothing. "They won't," I said calmly. I walked out of the courthouse alone. I stepped onto the sidewalk. The sun was shining. The air smelled of exhaust and hot pavement, but to me, it smelled like fresh linen. I didn't have a wife anymore. I didn't have the retirement I had planned. But I had my dignity. I had my solvency. And I had 20 binders that proved once and for all that I was right. I walked to my car. I opened the trunk and looked at the stack of black binders. I picked up a black marker from the side pocket. On the spine of the top binder, right over the label that said 2019 taxes, I wrote one word in bold block letters: freedom. I closed the trunk. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I drove away into the sunlight, finally balanced. The camera focuses on the rear window of Henry's car as it merges into traffic. The reflection of the courthouse shrinks in the glass until it disappears, replaced by the open road ahead. Fade to black.